And welcome to Healing X Outreach Radio. I'm your host, Augustine Anastacio. That was Christ-Centric Fight for the Children. The Ephesians Project is the debut CD for that song. It's about abortion, but I just thought it's close enough a theme for today's program in that we want to protect children. Children are the epitome of innocence in society. We want to do everything that we can to protect our children from harm. And today's story is, it's a very tragic story about what happened to author and former Jehovah's Witness James Kostelniuk's children and his ex-wife. And so I just thought it was just along those lines that we wanted to explore under as far as an introduction into today's show. I just want to remind everyone, next week's show, 12 o'clock Eastern Time, it will be September 27th, and we will have author Tammy Dickerson. She is a former Jehovah's Witness, and she wrote a book called Jehovah's Witnesses and the United Nations. And so I will not be hosting that show. I will be at the Pennsylvania retreat that they have for former Jehovah's Witnesses called the Witnesses Now for Jesus Convention. That convention has been going on for over 30 years. Joan Sentner and Bill Sentner were the original hosts for that convention. Joan has turned it over to three guys I know. One is Eric Grieshopper, Bob Anderson, and Doc Bob, for those of you who know those guys. They're on Facebook. And if you want to just take a look at the program, I think it's at WNFJ something, but just Google Witnesses Now for Jesus Convention, and it will show up. You can see the convention on Ustream live, so you can also Google Witnesses Now for Jesus Ustream, and you will find out where it will be live. I will be speaking on Friday at 3 p.m. in the afternoon, and but the whole convention schedule is right there on the website for the convention. I just don't have it before me, but if you Google it, it will pop right up, and you'll see Witnesses Now for Jesus Convention there. I just want to prepare you people ahead. We're going to have a change in programming. That is, we're adding some others to the programming, so I am in negotiations with forjehovah.org. That's Christy Darlington or Christy Harvey and their ministry at forjehovah.org. And so they will be airing some shows soon. So I'm just going to alert you, I don't know when yet, but she's going through the parameters of possibly on a Tuesday and maybe even multiple programs. Some will be in different languages for those that are in other parts of the world. I think Liberian, some half-hour segments of shows that they did for Liberia or Armenian languages. And so there's a lot of stuff that's going to be happening. I'm still here on Saturdays. Nate, who's the original host, will be here next Saturday interviewing Tammy Dickerson. So if you get to listen to some of the archives, you'll hear Nate's voice. Nate was the founder of this outreach. He stepped down from it, gave me the car keys, and I've been running with it ever since. But I'm just glad to have Nate to come in and fill in every now and then as a backup. And Nate he's great. He's a great interviewer. And if you've never heard Nate's voice, just go listen to some of the older shows, and you'll hear Nate Beckman. And this was his baby right here in a prayer session with a bunch of old women in the church. And he started a huge website called Healing XJWS blog. It was a blog website. It was the largest of its kind. We grew up to over 500 members. And then we went to Facebook, and eventually when he turned over the keys, I changed the name and wanted to go beyond just Jehovah's Witness issues, but to advance other cults. And we were doing that even as Healing XJWS, so that's an FYI. Some news that you're probably unaware of. Tomorrow I will be giving a trial sermon. I applied to be a senior pastor in a small Baptist church. So I have a passion for teaching the Word of God, and so we'll see. This might be something else. I will not be ceasing the radio program, even if I get hired as a pastor. Just letting you guys know that. But it's just something I enjoy teaching, and so if you have, if you're not an atheist, if you're a Christian or whatever, just pray for me. And I hope I can get this spot as a teacher in this church and as a preacher, and I'll be preaching on the cross, the same subject that I'm preaching on in PA, except it'll be tailored to a congregation as opposed to Jehovah Witness or the cults, ex-Jehovah Witness issues. So, without further ado, I just want to welcome our guest. James Kostelniuk was a Jehovah Witness. He knew he would leave, and he knew that he would be shunned when he left. And unfortunately, there were some things that happened. He had divorced his wife. His wife wanted a divorce, Kim Anderson, and she remarried to what she thought was a kind of Jehovah Witness that she could rely upon, someone who was spiritual, someone who was interested in the religion, and that man, that was a mistake in her judgment, because that man was a predator to their children, and if you got to see it on TV, an Investigation Discovery Channel series. It's in Season 2, Episode 6, Deadly Devotion, Witness to Murder. And James has a book, and the book is called Wolves Among Sheep, The True Story of Murder in a Jehovah Witness Community. And I would imagine that the title, Wolves Among Sheep, relates towards children.
Okay.
And what the Jehovah's Witnesses have, they have predators, and they're hiding them, and they're not exposing them. And in many respects, we've had Silent Lambs on here, and we've had Bill Bowen, and they're protecting pedophiles. And it's unbelievable that what's going on in the Jehovah's Witness community and the denial there. And I would say that the pedophile issue in the witnesses is far worse currently than what's going on in the Catholic Church, even though they're quick to point on the Catholics about their pedophile issues. It's unbelievable, the hypocrisy and the denial that exists right now in the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society, and the finger pointing at what is a problem that is far worse because of their own denial. And there's a guy here in Washington, D.C., and if you got to see him, he's near the VP's house up there on Wisconsin Avenue. Actually, it's on Mass Avenue, and he has this big sign, and he's trying to expose the Catholic Church for its hiding pedophiles. I would say now at least the Catholic Church admits they have pedophiles. They don't know how to handle the issue right now. It's a conundrum. There have been some things that have been done by the current Pope with some of the exposures to pedophiles and some of the priests they've had. Have they done enough? No, they haven't. But they're doing something. The Watchtower Bible and Tract Society continues to protect, spend their money protecting pedophiles and excommunicating the victims. That's a travesty. That's unbelievable. How can it's just a nightmare beyond nightmares. You are a victim of pedophilia. Your children have been a victim of pedophilia. Candace Connie was a victim of pedophilia. And the religion that she relied on to protect her turned their backs on her, protected the man that was victimizing her, and then tried to excommunicate her, get rid of her, and silence her. And that should not happen. That should not happen to any victim as a child, and that's what this episode's about, and I'm very, very passionate. You can hear me about this. because it's just criminal what's going on, and there's no excuse for it. And so, without further ado, James, I think you're on the air. James.
Hello, Augustine.
Hello, James. I'm a little passionate about this, my brother.
Well, I appreciate that, and I can hear the passion in your voice.
James, I want to hear a little bit about your story entering into the Jehovah's Witnesses. Were your parents Jehovah's Witnesses, and how did you enter into the cult?
Well, it's a long story, and I describe it in my book, Wolves Among Sheep. But the thing is, this religion, this Jehovah's Witness religion in my family goes back, I think, to the Bible students' time. When we lived, my family, before I was born, lived in the Interlake area of the province of Manitoba, which is just above North Dakota, United States. And the Cole Porters were coming around in those days. I guess that was in the 30s or the 20s. And my grandparents on both sides were converted to being Bible students. And then during the war, in the Second World War started, they really became quite involved. And my mother and father did too, because, as I say, on both sides of the family, they were Jehovah's Witnesses. First Bible students and then Jehovah's Witnesses. So when I was born, they had left the organization. It had to do with a move that my parents had made from one part of the Interlake to the other, and there was no congregation in that area. And getting around in the 40s was hard, more difficult than it is now. And they were kind of ostracized by the Winnipeg Beach congregation for leaving that congregation, and they just thought they would quit. And they kind of went into, into the world, into society. My father played a violin with a band, and they sort of went into community social events, and they loved music and dancing. And so when I was born, they were not Jehovah's Witnesses until they returned in their middle age. When my parents returned to becoming Jehovah's Witnesses in Selkirk, Manitoba, when I was about 14, and I sort of went along with them because I was kind of religiously inclined. I had attended the United Church of Canada, which is kind of a mainstream church, Protestant church, and so I was inclined to read the Bible and to be religious, to be spiritual when I was a child, and I just kind of followed them along when they attended the Kingdom Hall in Selkirk, Manitoba, and became a witness and was baptized about a year later. That's how I got my start as a Jehovah's Witness.
Wow. You go way back. I actually, when I left the organization, I actually became a voting member of the International Bible Student Association, and their membership is a lot different. It's the ecclesia. Basically, you become a voting member as far as you voting your elders in. And so I was
completely different political system. Yeah.
Yeah, it's every ecclesia. They call them ecclesias. Votes their own elders, and Judge Rutherford, of course, changed the whole system to a more centralized authority. Something, of course, that Pastor Russell did not want because he was anti-organization, and so he believed in the autonomy of the ecclesias and their ability to have a say and who would govern the congregations. Ecclesia being just the Greek word for congregations. The organization or the religion took a turn for its worse under Rutherford. There's no doubt about it. And it was, of course, the auspices of an egomaniac and continues to be directed by egomaniacs that has really caused so much dissent from us, ex-members. And I've said this before, if the Jehovah's Witnesses ran itself the way the current Bible students do, they would not find so much opposition as they do have today, because the Bible students don't have opposition.
They're kind of peaceful and quiet, aren't they?
Yes.
I mean, the Bible students are.
Yes,
Yeah.
they are.
I remember my father remarking when I was 14, 15, when my parents returned to the Jehovah's Witnesses.
Right.
He said that after a 20-year absence from the witnesses, he remarked to me that he didn't think there was as much love and kindness among the witnesses that there were among the Bible students that he remembered as a child. The international Bible students seemed to be different to him, more loving.
Yeah. They are.
I remember that.
Completely different. I completely agree with them. They're very, very nice people, and in many cases they meet in homes. And when they have a convention, I will say this: when I was a Bible student, they admired the largeness of the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society and its membership. You know, it was as if like, wow, our big brother, you know, they're doing so well, but only in a sense of numbers. They wish that they could get those numbers, but other than that, they do recognize there are definite differences. There is the Bible students do have, I think, some parts of their website geared towards Jehovah's Witnesses. Questions for Jehovah's Witnesses, a letter to our Jehovah's Witness friends, things like that. Mm-hmm. But they are very much more kinder. Their disciplinary measures are a lot more modest, as in most churches, discipline is done a lot more modestly done. Not to say that excommunication doesn't exist, but it means something different in churches, and it doesn't mean these harsh, extreme forms of shunning that we see in the Jehovah's Witnesses, and that has a lot to do with the measurements that Rutherford had put in. He just completely reworked the organization in a way of really controlling people, micromanagement. But James, I'll tell you what I'm really curious about, and I saw the episode Deadly Devotion. Have you gotten to see it yet?
I've seen it twice. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. I'm curious.
To be honest, it's so real. It's hard for me to watch. So I watch it sparingly.
They did a good job. They did a great job.
I think so. Yes.
Yeah, and actually, the thing that I loved that they did was that they really showed us how harsh the controlling mechanisms of the Watchtower Society is in the elder arrangement.
So that to you is accurate?
Yeah, I thought that was very, very accurate. Of course, the way they portrayed it was kind of cartoonish, but it was accurate. It was accurate, I think, in how they they
did the lead elder to you seem a little aggressive?
Yes.
Yeah, a little bit. Although it was pointed out to me, and I remember it well, that some circuit overseers could be just about as harsh in their presentations as that lead elder was portrayed to be.
Well,
I've heard criticisms that elders are generally soft-spoken and mild in their discussions, from the platform. But I have seen that, like I say, leaders, district and circuit overseers who are quite aggressive.
In my congregation, we had one elder that was very aggressive, and when I was being excommunicated, there's always one particular elder who can't wait to get a hold of an apostate.
Oh boy! And work them over, so to speak.
Yes,
verbally.
Just to enjoy that. He wants to enjoy that because here is the one-on-one against Satan, the devil himself. So, for us, it was Brother Jackson. Brother Jackson was a real jerk. And he was just a jerk in general in his life. I mean, his children were not witnesses. I don't think they ever were witnesses, but to hear the way he talked about his children and to hear his misogynism in the car, because I would ride he was actually, I was in a carpool with Brother Jackson. He would ride us to the bus, and then I would take a bus. And then Brother Scott in my hall was a former Watchtower headquarters guy. But Brother Jackson could not wait to get a hold of me. He really wanted me. And I didn't give him the satisfaction because I turned in my letter and I said, look, that's that. You know, I don't need to go through the shenanigans. But, so, I mean, I would take it that those elders, they were accurately, you were giving them information, I guess, to the programming on portrayal of elders and what you went through and whatnot. I'm just
you mean to the filmmaker, Justin?
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Now I'll explain that. It was the filmmakers were from New York City. They're called Lion Television, and they produce programs, documentaries like this for television producers. In this case, it was ID Discovery, and there was a very good man, Joe Bly, who interviewed me on the telephone many times, and he would ask me questions like, how did Jehovah's Witnesses dress? Because I guess that was important for their presentation and how they would do their reenactments. So I tried to explain, that if you went down Wall Street in New York City and you looked at people, that's about the way you would see Jehovah's Witnesses wearing business suits or casual dress, and they wouldn't stand out. But unfortunately, I wasn't consulted during the filming, and if I had have been consulted, they wouldn't have dressed Kim with a long skirt the way they did.
Mm-hmm.
So those minor things I was left out on, and if I had have been in on the editing process, I would have corrected those little mistakes.
Right.
But I think that in my opinion, the message came through.
Right.
The message that was so important that there's religious oppression here and so forth.
How did you come up with the title of your book, Wolves Among Sheep? That just sounds very
how did that come?
Of Bill
that came through my agent, who was a non-Jehovah's Witness. I had an agent back in Toronto, back in the day around 2000, and she came up with that. She was pretty literary, and she had some ideas about words, and I guess that's a take on a scripture from what do you know the scripture?
Yes,
I have it here. Yeah, it's a kind of a turn of a phrase on that scripture.
Do you want to read it?
From the New Testament.
Uh-huh.
I'm just looking for it here.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead with whatever you wanted to say. Yes, it's from Matthew 7:15. Beware of false prophets, which come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ravening wolves.
Wow.
So it's a take on that scripture.
Right. Wow.
Meaning, meaning that that bad people can infiltrate or insinuate themselves into a congregation. They can be pedophiles or whatever, and they can prey on innocent sheep, children, and so forth, women.
I thought in the program they covered this a little bit, and I thought that I don't know, was it you that reached out to the gentleman that's in prison right now for the crime that he committed, or was it that he that reached out to you?
Actually, how it happened was I was writing a journal and working with a therapist, and the therapist encouraged me to keep writing this journal. And in the course of that, I contacted Jeff Anderson's mother, who lived in Houston, Texas. I had never talked to her before, but I got her phone number through Kim when Kim needed child support payments sent down there from me. And so I had her phone number, and I phoned her and had a nice conversation with her. She turned out she was a Lutheran. And she said things like, my son Jeff Anderson is dead to me now because he's in prison for life. And, she was very compassionate and whatnot. But in the course of that conversation, she said, well, why don't you let Jeff write to you? Maybe he can answer some of these questions you have about why he did this. Because she didn't know, Who knows? So I said, to be polite to her, I said, yes. Yeah, you can write to me, never expecting that he would. And then when the letter from Kent Institution in British Columbia came to me 2 weeks later, I was quite shocked. But nevertheless, I guess unconsciously, that's what I really wanted to do. I wanted to communicate with him. I wanted to find, determine what had happened, how it had happened, what had motivated him, and so forth. So that started like a 5-year correspondence between him and me. Sporadic correspondence through mail.
He got a life sentence. Did he get no parole in that life sentence?
Yeah, in Canada we have a federal system here of justice, where there's first-degree murder, and only about 5% of all homicides are deemed as first-degree, meaning premeditated murder, which is very hard to prove. So he got that, but he got 3 counts of first-degree murder because, of course, he had killed 3 people. But in Canada, those sentences are to be served concurrently. So what it means is that he could get some sorts of limited parole after serving 22 years, and maybe full parole after serving 25 years. But he's still in prison in British Columbia because he would have to prove to a parole board that he is no longer deemed a threat to society. He hasn't been able to do that yet.
Right.
Although he's had one parole hearing in 2009 after serving, I think, 22, 23 years, something like that. But he was turned down at that parole hearing for day parole. And nobody really knows what's going to happen with him. But if he should ever be released on full parole, he would probably be deported to the United States because he's a United States citizen, not a Canadian citizen. And he wouldn't have any parole supervision down there at all because if he was a Canadian, all lifers have to report to a parole officer if they're released, but not in the United States because there's no jurisdiction there for that, for the crime he committed here in Canada. Do you understand what I mean? He would be out on the streets, and he could reinvent himself as whatever he wanted to do. Pardon?
Well, let's pray that never happens.
Well, I'm doing my best. I want to tell everyone that I'm doing my best to keep him where he is, because I think that's best for society that he stays behind bars.
One of the things I noticed,
and we have prisoners here, multiple murderers like Clifford Olson, for example, who killed 9 children here back in the 80s, and he died in prison after. I think he may have tried 3 or 4 times to get parole, but he was always denied because the families of the victims were always there, reading their impact statements, and he finally died. So this is what's going to happen to these multiple murderers. They often die in prison. They never get released, which is good.
They should never ever go out to the vote for killing children. And what's going on now with ISIS and with children is just
it's dreadful.
It is. It's horror of horrors, and people like that just should receive the full due penalty of the law and never should be freed.
Yes.
Now, Kim, how is it that you guys were able to get this divorce done? Because I was like, I always thought that. I take it this was probably in the 70s, maybe, was it, that you had realized that you no longer wanted to be a witness, and she wanted out of the marriage. I'm starting to think that maybe, because I've heard, this is not the first time that I've heard people that where the witnesses actually were pushing for divorce, and I guess earlier on the organization is so fearful of apostate spouses that they made some exceptions to the rules and deemed, I guess, spouses that had a difference of religious opinion as a threat, and so they wanted to help for divorces. Is that the case? What happened here?
Well, yes, I was disillusioned with the Watchtower Society after the 1975 prophetic failure. And I discussed it with Kim, and she didn't want to talk about it. She wanted to stay a witness. And then I discussed it with the elders, and I got into some trouble about that. Shouldn't be talking this way, and I was censured for that. But eventually, I was disfellowshipped, and that's exactly what Kim wanted. She wanted me out of her life. So I tried to remain her husband for some time, but it was a losing battle, and I could see that I was just a persona non grata, and there was no use fighting, so I gave up. But as to your question about wanting to get apostates out of the family, I think that's probably true. You mean on the part of the congregation?
Right.
Yeah, I think that's probably true, although I didn't see any evidence of it. As far as Kim's divorce, she divorced me. She needed divorce based on adultery in order to remarry, right. Didn't she? Why? Because if I didn't commit adultery, there would be no grounds for her to remarry.
Right.
You understand that?
Yes.
So in some way, she got me to cooperate in admitting that I had a girlfriend. This was some months and months after I had separated from her. I got into a community of divorced people. There were groups like that at the time, and we went to dances, and we had a social club, and so I met somebody there, and that's how that whole thing happened. I was foolish enough and naive enough to want to help her to get this divorce the way she wanted the divorce. Like, you could have a divorce in British Columbia at that time. I think they called it a breakdown of marriage. And you could actually get a divorce if you were separated for 3 years based on that. But that wasn't good enough for her because she would never have the right in the eyes of the congregation to remarry.
Yes.
So that's why she got me to cooperate and admit to the elders that I had a girlfriend.
Right.
This other party. And therefore that's why I was disfellowshipped, you see.
Well, I could understand that. You just wanted peace and for her
I just wanted to get out, and I didn't want to lie. Although today I probably would have done things differently to protect my reputation with my children and in the congregation, because now I was completely
an adulterer.
Slandered and adulterer.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And then the whole thing with my relationship with my children just went downhill after that.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, it's funny is funny not as in joke, but it's odd that even with me when I put in my disassociation letter, I put a stipulation that they make sure that they know that I'm disassociating myself and that I'm not being disfellowshipped, and that to prevent from any rumors that I was an adulterer or committing fornication, because, and oddly enough, they don't like the perception that someone actually left willingly for doctrinal reasons.
But they want to make these distinctions,
right,
according to rules and so forth.
Yeah, and
is that what you mean?
Yeah, well, yes, and
it bears down on your reputation one way or the other, doesn't it?
Right. Yes.
Whether you're an adulterer or you're an apostate or you just want to quit, there's a distinction there.
But they would prefer it be a moral issue, so that as opposed to a crisis of conscience issue,
because then it goes into something else.
Right, they want to disreputize you.
Yes,
it's real easy to point the finger at someone being yeah, it is. It is slander.
It's slander. They just want to ruin your reputation in the Jehovah's Witness community. Yeah.
Yes.
And then, but then they reprimand the congregation for gossiping about it. They're not supposed to gossip about it.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's exactly why I wanted to open that particular that particular issue, so that people can see that they are concerned about making sure that the one that is leaving is completely slandered and disreputized in the eyes of the congregation.
And then forgotten about.
No one will.
And then forgotten about, yes.
Right.
Yes. In other words, they're dead. They're dead and forgotten.
Yes. Now,
but I wasn't dead and forgotten, Augustine.
You weren't.
No, because of the actions I've taken, obviously. Writing a book, talking to you.
Oh, yeah.
And the whole thing has gone global now with ID Discovery. You see, I'm an example of a person, a disfellowship person, who can speak out.
Right. Yeah.
Because the whole idea of disfellowshipment is to shut you up.
Right. I don't know if you know John Cedars, and he's done great work with a website called JW Survey. He's an elder, former elder, and I think he is from somewhere in the Netherlands, but he's been doing great stuff on YouTube. And he actually had videotaped his apostasy trial.
He did? You mean secretly?
Yes.
That is incredible.
Yes.
And
and
of course, those are supposed to be secret meetings with no records.
Yeah. Well, now there's a bunch of people now actually doing that. There's another guy who also videotaped not only just audio but videotaped his apostasy trial.
But obviously the judicial committee wouldn't agree to that, would they?
No,
to the videotaping. I mean,
he kept
it was a secret
camera hidden in the bag, and then
incredible.
in his bag.
Carry on.
So but so John Cedars has been doing great work, and of course he let them know the reason why he would go public with this, because they have taken his family away from him. Now that is his parents and any that are, and unfortunately him and his wife came out together. And so he's been able to keep his immediate family. But he's been stigmatized, of course, by his extended family because of what's going on. And so a man who has lost his family has nothing left to lose.
That's
and that's what he is. It is. It's a horrible situation.
Well, a horrible thing to go through.
That's why we do what we do. That's why we do what we do. And it's not an axe to grind against active Jehovah's Witnesses, because our family members were or are active Jehovah's Witnesses, and we care about them. So it's about the leadership and what it has done to create a bubble society and protect its members from people that love them. We love our families. I love my mother. I love my sister. I love my grandparents, and I had them stripped away from me.
Yeah, and we have to remember that the Jehovah's Witnesses, our family members who are Jehovah's Witnesses, may be hurting too because of being cut off from us. So it works both ways.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. Absolutely. And I do have a question to ask Kim. When she was in the program, I saw, and I haven't read the book, and so I do want everyone to know you can obtain the book on Amazon.com. There's a link on the advertisement if you're watching this if you're watching the program or listening by PC. in the advertisement, you'll see there at the bottom the link to the actual book, and which is entitled "Wolves Among Sheep: The True Story of Murder in a Jehovah's Witness Community." So you can obtain the book there. And I've also given the season an episode, so if you want to, I guess now with the internet you can download programs and whatnot, so you can probably get that specific program. But I was wondering, did Kim ever reach out to you when her current husband, Jeff, she had suspicions of his abuse? She reached out to the elders, and no doubt they ignored her and actually sided with her husband. They actually sided with him.
Yeah, that's the irony of it, isn't it? No, Augustine, she never did, and I assume that she didn't reach out to me because she was afraid that if she was ever deemed an unfit mother by the authorities, that then I would have custody of the two children. And that's only an assumption. She never told me that. Nobody ever told me that. But I think it's safe to make that assumption, that she was just trying to keep all of this bad stuff that was going on behind the scenes from me so that I wouldn't have any grounds to have custody of the children.
As a result of what happened to Kim, did any of her members of the family leave the organization?
Not that I know of. As far as I know, her family is still all Jehovah's Witnesses. She had she had a half-brother and a half-sister with her mother. And her mother and father, I do believe they are still alive and still faithful Jehovah's Witnesses today. However, I have been Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, what about any friends that may have she may have had?
Oh, that's another story. I'll tell you that story. A few years ago, after I published this book, it was first published in Toronto with HarperCollins, and that was in 2000. And so the book went pretty well. It was distributed across the land, across Canada, not in the United States so much, but in Canada. And a few years back, a lady by the name of Sharon Mulder from Calgary, her eldest son contacted me, saying that she would like to talk to me. I didn't know who Sharon was, but it turned out that Sharon was Kim's best friend and had attended her congregation, Wellington Heights in Burnaby, BC. And then when Sharon moved to Coquitlam, the next suburb over from Burnaby, when Kim was trying to get away from Jeff Anderson and his abuse, she left Jeff Anderson for the second time in Burnaby and went to live with Sharon and her family for a couple of weeks before she returned to Burnaby. So anyway, Sharon turned out to be a good friend of mine. She is today. And she was featured on the ID Discovery documentary, the one that you saw.
Exactly.
Murder.
Yeah, that's why I wanted to
You
get
remember
that.
her? Yeah, she was.
Yes,
so you see, because of
there.
my correspondence with Sharon and her husband Roy, she was flown into Vancouver in last December, for the filming of this documentary. And you see, I have these contacts now who fill me in. There's Stacy Lay as well, who was also featured on the documentary. Stacy was about a little older than my children and good friends with my kids. And I knew Stacy's family. Stacy's uncle, Mervyn, was a witness elder who talked to me, censored me. And so I knew her family, but I didn't really know Stacy, and I didn't know her relationship to my children. She was another one who came forward through my book, through Amazon and so forth. So this is the beauty of publishing this book. I was able to meet people I'd never known they even existed, who were friends of my family. Stacy was close to my children, had babysat them many times. And these people were deeply impacted by the crimes. And you can't really deal with this unless you have some way of discussing it with somebody. And I guess reading the book talking to me, they tell me that this has all been helpful to them.
Right.
Since then, since the documentary was aired on August the 20th, just last month, I have met people from the Wellington Heights congregation who I didn't even know of, hardly knew of them. But now they're telling me more and more things about what happened subsequent to those crimes in the congregation, how the congregation elders tried to shut people up. There were people who in the congregation who were obviously upset and wanted to know if Jeff Anderson, the offender, was baptized or not. And they attended the trial, and there were these people that were upset but had no way of expressing it, no way of getting support or getting answers. And some of them left the organization. This family that I'm talking about that live in BC today, I'm in correspondence with them. They're filling in some blanks about what occurred in the congregation in the 5 years after the murders occurred, and how the elders deliberately tried to get people to stop talking about this. And today, I think the memory of these three victims, Kim, Lindsay, and Yuri, is pretty well blotted out, forgotten. And I think that's deliberately forgotten.
Yeah. They can't stop it now.
Augustine, yes, that's the irony of it. It's gone global now. So there's no way of stopping it. And
that's amazing.
Isn't that something?
That's
really something.
That's
terrific.
That's great.
I want to say that so many people on Facebook, you can criticize Facebook, you can do whatever you want with it, but in my case, because I belong to all these different groups, ex-Jehovah's Witness groups, and there's probably over a dozen of them, as you know. You're on them too. I have found so many people, ex-Jehovah's Witnesses, who are supportive, who are loving, kind, in a way it's 1,000 times more kind than I ever got from Jehovah's Witnesses. I just want to thank them all.
It's amazing. It's amazing. It's a movement. The organization is hemorrhaging right now, hemorrhaging members.
Yeah.
And
but why were they so cold? And why were they, Dustin? Why were the witnesses so cold to me and others? And when you get out here and you find ex-Jehovah's Witnesses, they're so much the opposite. It just blows me away with kindness.
It's amazing because
and compassion.
It's an ecumenical movement, and what I mean ecumenical, an ecumenical movement of people who care about one another, care about each other's stories, and are working to do whatever they can. Activism, untold activism.
And going in all directions.
From all directions.
Yeah.
I'm a Christian. I have atheists. I have agnostics. I have Bible students. You have people
New
from
Age,
all
Buddhists,
New Age, whatever,
all sorts of great people
coming together because they recognize that this group is harmful to the public, harmful to its own people, just like the Pharisees were harmful to their own people, and Jesus exposed that.
As you said to me, Augustine, one time, to me, they have one thing in common, all these ex-Jehovah's Witnesses. They are against and they fight religious oppression.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think that's probably the commonality right there.
No man's conscience.
They are against religious oppression and for civil rights.
No man's conscience should be dictated to. Our conscience should be free. We should have the liberty to choose what to believe, how to believe, and it doesn't matter. I can disagree with a lot of people's belief systems, but they have that choice and liberty to choose. And
freedom is a wonderful thing.
Yeah, it is. It's a wonderful thing to be free, and to come to an educated position, and to allow people to dialogue and discuss their differences as opposed to judge them for their differences.
Yes. And to recognize that all of us ex-Jehovah's Witnesses are on a different level of development on our journey.
Right.
And I am not what I was 5 years ago. in the way I think and feel. And if I'm lucky enough to live another 5 years, I probably will be different again. So we're all on a journey going forward, I hope. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely, absolutely. I just want to let our listeners know, if you want to speak with James Kostelniuk, if you're listening by PC, the number is 347-934-0379, and all you have to do is press 1. That's 347-934-0379, and press 1 if you have a question or a comment.
Yeah. Augustine, they can call me Jim if they like. It's a little more informal.
Yeah, okay.
You can too.
All right, Jim.
James is a little formal.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because Jim is a natural nickname for James. All I can think of is Captain James T. Kirk, and Jim. They called him Jim all the time. So
they did,
It's a natural nickname.
Sure.
Now, so all of these people now are watching the program. They're reading your book. They're coming to an education of what happened there, and it's just.
And I'm still learning too, Augustine. I'm still learning, and I could probably write a 4th edition and fill in some blanks that I had before in the book, because of these people that I'm meeting through Facebook, through your program, through the internet. People who knew my family, people who attended that congregation, and other people too, wonderful people all over the world.
Have you been in contact with Rick Farron from Six Screens?
I have, and I was a guest on his program some years ago.
Okay.
Maybe 5 years back.
Yeah, I think he wants to
in
get
relation
you back
to
on.
this book.
I think he wants
the
to get
book
you
didn't
back
have
on.
that much of an audience in the United States then, because it was only published in Canada. Now, of course, through Amazon and other platforms, it's pretty well international, available everywhere, even in Norway.
I could definitely see you doing a 4th edition because of all the feedback that you're getting now, and you're learning now from a congregational level now what happened.
Yes, from that particular congregation, and I'm making new friends, Augustine. New friends who seem to need to talk about it, because you can go 30 years without talking about it, and you're filled with anger issues and questions, and so talking about it to a person can help.
One of the things that when I saw the program, one of the things that really, really disturbed me was Jeff Anderson's absolute unrepentant, and that is to this day, unrepentant behavior, and his propensity to still try to blame Kim for what happened. And that drove me nuts. And they actually, showed the real Jeff Anderson speaking about it briefly at the end. And I would imagine that in your interactions with him, he was probably trying to do the same thing, trying to allegiance yourself, with him, as in what she was like. You were married to her. I could imagine him trying to take that strategy to try to gain you over, possibly as to help him out as far as maybe getting his sentence lessened or.
Yeah, that's exactly what his agenda was, I believe, was to get me on his side, and we did have Kim in common, that's for sure, as a person who was, she was just human and could be difficult to deal with at times. I think she probably had bipolar disorder, so we all have difficulties, and some of us are difficult to deal with, and so we had that in common, and it surprised me how well he understood me through her, because of knowing her so well, and it was a little perverse from that perspective that that we had these children and this woman in common.
Right.
But I had an agenda. I needed information, and he had an agenda to get me on his side so that he could maybe get parole someday. But in the end,
that's what I was thinking. He was going to try to get you on his side.
And to be honest, at first I really thought my forgiveness would help matters, would help him, would help me, and I wanted to, in the best of the situation, I wanted to find something good in him. I really had this idea that forgiveness could help, but forgiveness is just it's a Band-Aid. It really doesn't solve the situation at all. I'm sure there are some Christians who can do it and are sincere about it, and I was sincere about it, and that's entirely up to them. But in this case, it didn't work out very well.
Yeah, I mean, it's easier to forgive someone who is repentant. Well,
he pretended to be. He, in some way, I think he was sorry, and he does have a very pleasing personality. He could fool people. And sociopaths can be like that. Very charming, well spoken.
Right.
He was a radio man. He knew the language. He had these nice Southern manners.
Mm-hmm.
You see what I'm saying? It's easy to talk to this guy, and he can put himself forward as a nice guy. And I think that's the way he always manipulated people that way with his personality. So it's easy to get fooled.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is that we always have to remind ourselves that charisma tries to cover many wounds, but
yeah. So if you didn't know this guy was a murderer and you didn't know anything about him and you met him, you probably would even, who knows, you might even like him. That's just the way he presents himself to the world, And he claims to be a born-again Christian now. They have religious programs and even churches within the prison system.
Right.
In the United States and Canada. So you can become a Christian right in prison. And that's what he did. Yeah. What do you think about that?
Well, I really do hope that he did become a Christian. I mean, I know that David Berkowitz, and I know, the son of Sam Killer.
Oh, yes. Yes, I remember him.
Same claim. So I really do hope. And if that's the case, if it's authentic, then it just really shows you. But
you want it to be sincere, though.
Yeah. That you'll always
everybody wonder
that. Yeah. That's the big question: is it sincere? And so, if that's the case, then this just really shows you how vast God's grace is. That that Christ can take upon such horrendous crimes against humanity upon his person on the cross, and that is just a testimony of really how magnificent God is. And,
yes, because real Christianity can transform an individual, a real sinner, into something better, much better. But in this case, when it's murder of children and so forth, women and children, you just wonder how sincere a person is. No one really knows. Yeah.
So, I mean, I just would really pray that it's authentic for his own sake and his own soul, and when he approaches God, that he can come to God with a clean conscience and an authentic, vibrant faith. Someone has pressed one. I
kind of doubt that, though, Augustine.
Yeah.
I kind of doubt about the sincerity of all of that.
Yeah, I mean, so would I.
Just my opinion.
So would I.
My personal opinion. I don't know for sure.
989, you're on the air with Jim. Hello? 989, you're on the air with Jim Kostelniuk.
You have a question?
Yes, you have a question?
Go ahead.
Hello? Okay. Maybe you accidentally pressed 1. Just want to let our listeners know, if you do have a question or a comment, the number is 347-934-0379, and just press 1 if you want to ask a question or share a comment. We do have some listeners listening live by phone, and there are also listeners listening by PC, but we never know who's listening by PC until after the program. Yeah, I can see who's on the phones. I just can't see who's on their PCs, and then the numbers come as soon as the program, who's listening by PC, and then everybody will listen to podcasts, from here to eternity. So, most of our listeners are podcast listeners, actually. So, and we have a really, really great foundation of podcast listeners that listen at their own time.
Podcast is like a recording that they download to their computer and play it later.
They download it
or
even onto their phones, and when people will
people
are going to work, they listen to programs on their phones instead of listening
on
to the
their
radio.
time when they want to listen. Yeah, that's good. That's good.
Yeah.
So, do you have an idea how many people are tuned in live at any time on your broadcasts?
I'll know the live numbers as soon as it's over. As soon as it's over.
When it's over. But typically,
it'll tell me
typically.
Yeah, it'll tell me who's. Typically, we'll have. We don't have a large live audience, but last week we had, I think almost 150 people listening live.
Oh, that's quite a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. So
depends on the guest.
It varies. It varies. We can go from 20 listeners to as many. The largest number of live listeners I ever had at one time was 800. But and that program actually winded up having over 22,000 listeners.
Oh my. With the podcast.
It was an amazing mountain, because what happens is that it just spreads, I guess. The larger number of live listeners, and it boosts your show up on the pages, and the visibility is great, and you'll get more and more people. But I have a great number I have over 100 subscribers to the show, so I know that I have people that are definitely listening. Those 100 subscribe to the show, and they're listening. I guess whenever they can, and we're on iTunes and whatnot. But since the ID program has come on, you have more people now. You're speaking to, and are they? I guess have any of them have decided that they would have left the congregation, or they're coming to you autonomously, covertly?
All sorts of ways. Yes.
Yeah.
There was one lady who on Facebook who described her mother. Her mother apparently had a change of heart after seeing the documentary. Most people just cry. Most people are just so shocked, and they cry. I don't mean to make them cry in a bad way, but crying sometimes is a good thing when it's a compassionate sort of thing. It's okay, and it helps me. It helps the victims to know that people care.
Yes.
Pardon me?
Yes. Yeah, because they knew her personally, because she was at their congregation, and I would imagine that now, knowing what happened, it's triggered those emotions. And the problem with the Watchtower Society is they teach Jehovah's Witnesses to repress those emotions.
Yes, and not
to
to
become
talk
automated.
about it.
Yeah.
Yes, and that's why there's no healing. Even after 30 years, there's no healing, because there's no expression for this pain, this sadness, and so forth. You need to find a forum for it, whether it's Facebook, whether it's a support group, whether it's talking to an author. It doesn't matter. You need, or a therapist. You have to express it and let it out, and then you'll feel better.
Yeah, because they're being taught to act like they don't care, and I just received some recent news, you know, and my sister, who I've just gotten in contact with after years and years and years, is now calling me on a semi-regular basis, and I thought my mom didn't care when it came to her grandchildren, and apparently she does. You know, she does. She has noticed that they're no longer there and that they're absent, albeit she doesn't want to be responsible for her own actions and them not being there. But she has noticed, and maybe because my sister has noticed that they're not there anymore, and so she is now has to answer to my sister, who suffers from some mental illness, possibly even demonic activity. But the thing is that now she's being forced to fess up to her responsibility in my children not being there, because she has shunned her son. And she was abusive to my children, you know, to my daughter, and so so it's shaken her now, I guess, and that's a good thing. That's a good thing that you know, she is now coming to grips with her responsibility and why my kids are not there anymore. And I've told my sister that if she would just have a humble heart, we could, you know, and discuss this, that my kids could resume their relationship with their grandmother, albeit according to her religious rules. I have had no problem with that. But, you know, when you start affecting children, then you have to protect your children, and so it's
your job.
Yeah, that's our job. Our job as parents, as adults, is to protect our children. And, wow, James, you know, your story is just, it's heart-wrenching. I mean, I know that you did everything that you could, and the Watchtower Society really just bound you and kept you from protecting your family. And they wanted to step in as the parent, and they couldn't even do that. Instead, they winded up siding with a man who
with the perpetrator.
Yeah, the perpetrator.
The man responsible for killing them. Yeah, I know. It's so terribly sad. And strangers on Facebook, people I've never met, you know, say that they are deeply saddened and they cry, and so. Here I have reached out to them, and I've reached out to the world, and I get all of this wonderful, loving kindness coming back to me. I appreciate that very much.
I definitely want to get you in contact with John Cedars, and John Cedars, because he would be someone. He's recently gotten out of the Watchtower Society. He is doing tremendous work.
I'll write that down.
In Europe. Yeah. And I'm gonna friend suggest him, and I'm actually going to private message you both for him to interview you. He has a YouTube channel, and I don't know if you know how to use Skype or your webcam, or you know, but I think he could possibly do an interview by webcam. And he's done some travel. He actually interviewed what's his name? I can't remember. He wrote Mind Control and Jehovah's Witnesses. I can't remember his name now. and he actually came out of the moon. He's wrote a bunch of books on cult mind control. That's why.
What language does he write in, Augustine?
Oh, John,
like what country
John
is he from?
Perfect, he speaks perfect English.
And where is he from?
I think he's from the Netherlands.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, he's from the Netherlands, but he speaks very, very good English. I've had him on the program. A lot of ex-Jehovah's Witnesses know him. He's been one of the people that were centrally responsible for the AWA movement. And I don't know if you're familiar with the AWA movement, which is an organized venture of, I think AWA stands for, let me look it up right here. I think it's Anti-Watchtower Associates, something like that.
Okay.
Yeah,
I haven't heard of it, no.
Yeah, but so I've come in contact with him, and even though he's not really involved with the AWA movement anymore, he's doing his own thing with JW Survey and United Alliance Against the Watchtower. That's the UAAW.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So he's done amazing work in Europe, and he's also worked with Randy and a couple other people in as far as organizing and spreading the word about abuse, and he's done a lot of great work on us getting to know the individual members of the governing body. So he's posted a lot of things from some of the talks by Anthony Morris, by Stephen Lett, by Samuel Hurd, and so that we can get an idea of the type of thinking that is leading this organization. And it's just the worst. These guys are far worse than the last 10. It's unbelievable.
Okay. Yeah, I'd like to speak with him.
Yeah, we've gone from the frying pan into the fire in leadership here, because the last 10 had some, and I'm sure you've read Ray Franz's Crisis of Conscience.
I have.
But yeah, and there's no doubt in the last 10 that you had some that were more controlling than others, and some members of the body that were actually not as demanding, and actually even agreed with Ray on some of these issues, and were just too afraid to speak up on his behalf of the stronger members.
Well, I think that's why some historians and critics of the Watchtower Society, like Jim Fenton, for example, don't believe that the leadership or the governing body or the Watchtower Society will change very much, because they're dominated by conservatives who would never change. And once you have that going, where are the Ray Franzes? They don't exist anymore.
Yeah.
Where are the people who want to make changes based on liberty?
Yeah,
there
and now
none.
with a smaller group, that really weeds out any of those that are more softer in their approach. So right now, we're starting to get to know, and Stephen Lett is the new guy on the block, on the governing body. And we're hearing these things from their talks that really, really, really expose how extreme they are about, really, really old-fashioned ways of thinking about women.
Yeah, they're tightening up, aren't they? Tightening up their policies. Yeah,
it's worse, and their whole attempt to now gain popularity by pushing their JW.org website is just 20 years too late to the pasture. And
yeah, they came onto the internet when the horse got out of the barn.
Right.
I mean, the horse is out of the barn. You can't put him back in now.
Yeah, and they're trying to.
Can
make
I talk
their
a little
website.
bit, Augustine? Can I talk a little bit about the documentary, how it was made?
Absolutely, yes. I definitely want to.
Well, I do believe, like I watch ID Discovery. It's a 24-hour, 24/7 channel, cable channel, doing nothing but true crime stories. Now, the big television networks like ABC, NBC, CBS, they have their own weekly true crime documentaries like 2020, Dateline,
Yes,
48 Hours, and that's a sort of thing has been going on now for 20 years or 30 years. But I do believe by this time, the producers of true crime have got their art. It's down to an art form practically, the way they produce it. Because first of all, you have this voiceover narrator of the story that you don't see, you hear them. You have talking heads like myself, and in this case, 5 other people that I gathered together. There was a criminology professor who had interviewed Anderson in 1989, Neil Boyd. There was a retired RCMP staff sergeant from Burnaby. There was a person who worked with prisoners, in a prisoner program, who knew Jeff Anderson, attended his trial. There were these 2 women from Ex-Jehovah's Witness women from Calgary who spoke. So you have this mixture in layers of talking heads. You have a voiceover narrator. You have reenactments. So you have actors that are brought to the fore. A person who played Kim, a person who played me as we were when we were younger. The children were portrayed. Anderson was portrayed in the context of the Jehovah's Witness community and the elders and so forth. So you have all of this coming together in a very fast-paced kind of narrative. And it seemed to me that when they the editing process is so good that the talking heads, the people speaking, echoed one another. I mean, they didn't mean to, but the editing did that. So somebody would say something, and then someone else would repeat it to reinforce it.
Right.
And you saw the whole drama unfold before you in 1 hour. And the effect was quite powerful, I thought, especially dramatizations. And the person who played Kim, and I've forgotten her name now, she's from New York City, a young actress, actually startled me because she looked so much like her and acted so much like her. It was chilling to watch that. It was almost like she'd come back to life. And I want to say that I had never had more sympathy for my ex-wife, Kim Anderson, than I'd had after seeing the documentary. The way they put that together, the pressure she was under from the elders, from the Jehovah's Witness community on one side, and from Jeff Anderson on the other side, and she just got more and more pressured, and there was no way out for her.
Yeah, I mean,
mind you, she had placed herself. She made those choices. She had placed herself in that vice grip.
Right.
But the way the actress portrayed her in such a cool manner, I was so impressed. And the other actors too. The actor for Jeff Anderson, although he didn't really look like him that much, but he certainly expressed that rage, and that sense of control that he had to have. He couldn't lose it. And
was he a big guy, Jeff?
He
Jeff
was
Anderson?
a big guy, well over 200 pounds, over 6 feet 1 tall, I think. Fairly imposing, fairly strong, And so I just wanted to say that I thought it was quite an achievement by the filmmakers. Although, as I said before, unfortunately, I wasn't called in as a resource for the editing process. I could have straightened out these little mistakes that they made. And I can name the little mistakes that some critics have mentioned. For example, Kim wore clothing that she would never have worn, a long skirt, when she went from door to door, which made her look more like a Hutterite than a witness. You know that. So that was one little thing. The other little thing that was mentioned is that Jeff Anderson, when he was married to Kim and abusing her, asked why she didn't buy his cigarettes. Well, we know for a fact that Jehovah's Witnesses don't smoke, are not allowed to. Now, the thing is, though, I don't know for sure. Like Anderson always said, he never smoked, he never drank. So he probably didn't smoke, but it's possible that he could have, right?
Yeah, well,
An
that's
individual
the other thing is I perceived that she had, that he probably, from watching the program, that he probably smoked because he was living a double life. He was not a devout Jehovah's Witness, and all the time.
Yeah, although a baptized Jehovah's Witness, yeah. So that was kind of what was one thing that was criticized. There were some other things like the aggressive lead elder. He seemed a little too aggressive, but we discussed that. You and I discussed that there were people, especially district and those leaders, district overseers, circuit overseers, could be quite aggressive from the platform, or aggressive to you, aggressive to, in terms of being in a judicial committee or in that kind of meeting. They could be quite aggressive towards an individual. Was there anything else that you noticed, Augustine, that wasn't quite right from a Jehovah's Witness perspective?
I thought that this whole idea that she was introduced to him by a friend, I guess, on some kind of social retreat.
No, you know what? Kim met Jeff Anderson when she went to a district assembly in Hawaii. And
okay, so they didn't
she
clarify
was
that.
She was I don't know. She was staying at the same bed and breakfast kind of thing that was provided by a Jehovah's Witness for visiting witnesses from around the world. He had stayed there from Houston, and she was staying there for the assembly, and that's how they met. I think they were doing laundry together or something like that, and they started talking. That's how they met. They met like a lot of witnesses meet, internationally through a district assembly or a circuit assembly.
Right.
That's how it happened. So you found that a little bit strange?
Yeah. Well, I mean, they didn't explain that it was through a district.
No, and they compressed a lot of things. For example, the person portraying me, the young James Kostelniuk, they portrayed him as being single at all times. But of course, that wasn't true. I had a wife, Marge Kostelniuk, who in the book you see that she's quite important, very important in terms of my support person, my reality check, and she was rarely fooled by anything that was going on in that situation. And I do believe that hadn't it been for my wife, Marge Kostelniuk, I'd probably be face down in a ditch right now, or I'd be gone, because you cannot. I've done a marvelous job at surviving this, and it's 29 years ago, and I've got a life now, and I'm doing fine. I'm healthy, but I couldn't do it alone. You could never do it alone. You need help. You need the help of therapists. You need the help of community, of a spouse, if you're lucky enough to have one who loves you. And so that's all important. Although I want to say that these children of mine, and even my ex-wife Kim, still loom large. They're still a part of me, and it'll always be that way. It's always going to be that way because, as John Walsh, from CNN, the father of a missing and murdered child, happened way back in 1983, and he goes out to find these criminals who get away. That's
America's
his job
Most
on
Wanted.
TV. America's Most Wanted. Now he's with this program on CNN called, what is it called? The Hunt. The Hunt. Some people may watch that. It's very interesting. Yeah. And he does help in finding, catching these perpetrators who are out there somewhere. He said, I became, that day, 1983, when my son disappeared, I became the father of a murdered child. And he said, and I will always be the father of a murdered child.
And that's
what happens to you. That's what happens to you. And he became very focused on finding these criminals, not only the man who killed his son, but all these other poor unfortunate victims too, representing them. So that's what he became dedicated and focused so much to. So it's the same with me. I will never get over it. And these, as a good friend, my good friend Sharon pointed out to me just yesterday, they will always be with you. They're part of your life, even though they passed on 30 years ago. And I still dream about them, Augustine, although I don't have nightmares. When I dream about them, it's very occasionally now, not very often. It's like they're a little older. They could be teenagers, older than what they were, and they seem to be checking up on me, see if I'm all right. So that's fine. They can do that.
Well, those are consoling
My
thoughts.
point is they're always there. Even if they're in the back of your mind, you never forget. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, those are your children, and what you're
and
doing
they seem
here,
to have a force about them. That's it, Augustine. They seem to. I know. I'm beginning to sound a little spiritual here, but they seem to have a force or a presence or helping me along. Not only to survive, but to speak out. Yeah.
They're pushing you so that you can save the hurt and the pain from others, because no one should have to suffer the pain and hurt a parent losing their child. And,
So it's so as I see it now, Augustine, this whole subject that I wrote about, this book that I wrote, it's not just about them, not at all. It's about so many other people out there who are suffering with similar experiences, and there's thousands of them out there. And so I'm compassionate with them, and they're compassionate with me. And that means a great deal.
Absolutely.
If I can help one person somewhere, to find their way to feel free, that's the main thing. And to get that message out there, that I think the documentary did a very good job, even though it had these minor little inaccuracies that I talked about. The message was clear, and that is that JW policies in congregations mess up with families, mess them up.
Yeah,
I think that was the message that came through. What was the message that came through for you in that documentary?
It was clearly that we have to, really put our children first. Put our children above religion. And, yes. When you put God above, or you put religion above your family, this is what happens. This is what can happen. I mean, obviously, my case is not going to happen to most people, because this is the worst of the worst, and what can go wrong did go wrong. Fortunately, for most families, it doesn't go that far. People may be severely damaged, but they survive. In this case, we had dead people who didn't survive. Ironically, I have a friend, and he distanced himself from his family, and he was a pastor of a church, and he had committed adultery. He lost his church. And we were just talking about him the other day, and I just really, the things that he did really pushed him away from his family, and he almost nearly lost his family and lost, and I just think that he wasn't thinking about his children enough, and we have to. The Bible makes it clear. The Bible makes it clear that one of the qualifications for spiritual leadership is that a man is a man of good character. That is, he is a father of his household. He is a husband of his wife. and so that you never put the congregation above your own family. You put your family first.
Okay, and that's what you believe now.
And so this religion has severed that idea. This religion has created a propensity that it becomes the end all and be all before even your family. And
but it leads to evil.
It forced Kim into a situation where she had to choose between, the situation which she was in danger and her standing in the congregation, and she always valued the standing that she had within the congregation until, by the time she made the decisions that she needed to make, and she made it was too late. She made the fatal flaw of leaving her door open.
Couldn't get out. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
As I said
this
before,
man was stalking her. He was stalking her
for months. Yeah.
And she left the door open, and by that time, it was just that he had enough power to do what he had done, and she was not far away enough from him. And you hear in the news about women taking their kids and the police have to put an APB out, and because they leave their spouse and because they feel that they're in danger, the children are in danger, and while they're committing a crime, you have to applaud that because they have decided, they have made the conscious decision to protect their children, even at the cost of, even when the state comes against them in such a case, because they're concerned about their children's safety, and sometimes even the laws of the government can come in a way. In this case, it was the religious policies of a religion that gives just entirely too much power to men, and really makes the women powerless. Women are. I've said this before. It's utterly ridiculous that I was a 12-year-old boy, and here I was with one of the pioneers in our congregation, and there's a woman who was sacrificing 90 hours a month. She was a regular pioneer, and I was a 12-year-old boy, and I was coming to her Bible study. And she had to put a rag on her head, a paper towel on her head, because she was teaching in my presence because I was baptized.
And you were 12. How ridiculous is that?
I was 12.
That's so
I was a
stupid.
child. I was a child.
Well, this is a misogynistic kind of culture. And, as John Walsh said in one of his programs, this is a dirty secret of America and the West, not just America, but the entire West, is that we have these shelters now that are overflowing with women and battered women and children, and it's kind of the dirty secret of our society that this is going on. I was on a board of one of those shelters back in Manitoba, and they needed money to build a bigger shelter because it was just a house they had with 4 bedrooms, and in this very religious community that we were in, with more churches in a 12,000 population town than anywhere else in Canada. We had all these battered women and this alcoholism that was rampant in the community. Christianity can be like that too.
Yeah.
And so it's ridiculous, and it's sad that women have to run to a shelter with black eyes and they're beaten up, and for their safety and the safety of their children.
Yeah,
I don't think we're aware of it enough. It's coming out now more with the NFL. You've seen what's happened there.
Yeah.
With some football players that are beating, punching their wives out in elevators and stuff like that.
And then beating their children.
Yeah, so again, you've got an institution that's run by men, and they have to step up and they have to do something. They have to do their part, to clean up their act and help to protect these innocent people, these women and children.
Well, we created a culture of misogynism,
it goes back way back.
You would think that you could run to your local church, and in this case, the Jehovah's Witnesses are the local church, and that you would
they didn't
be able
protect
to,
her; they made it worse.
Right, you would find.
And then after the fact, they tried to silence the congregation, stop them from talking about it, and then eventually erase their memory of the victims. How pathetic that is to me. I'm just glad that I'm still here to tell the story, and that I could reach out to people, and people could reach back to me.
And no doubt I'm sure she had a Kingdom Hall funeral, right? Was her?
Well, I attended it. Now, if you had read the book, which I expect you will, you'll see that that was the beginning of my publicity, the way I have spoken to the public and dealt with the media and written a book. We went to the Jehovah's Witness Memorial for the children with the idea that we'd be treated like human beings, even though I was disfellowshipped. But the shock that we got, the way they treated us by not speaking to us, by calling the children Andersons when they weren't, by just sort of deliberately treating us as if we were invisible. That was the beginning of all this. See, after that shock, I went to the local papers and started my publicity campaign, speaking out. Up to that time, I would never have spoken out. I've never said anything. I was just like a church mouse.
Mm-hmm.
But it started generating this speaking out from then on till the present day. And this is what's happened.
It's just
if the congregation had treated us like human beings and what we deserved as the father of murdered children, and the grandmother, my mother was there too. My present wife, Marge, was there. Marge was never a witness. My mother was a Jehovah's Witness at the time, in good standing, and they shunned her too because I guess she was guilty by association with me. Now, to the good, I must say that there are people I've met, like the people, many people who I know now as ex-Jehovah's Witnesses, had attended that memorial, had come from across the city. Maybe they didn't belong to that congregation, but they were there and they wanted to speak with us. And to their credit, they felt deep compassion and sadness, and they wanted to console us, but they weren't able to because they were being held back by the elders and by their policies, and the fact that they had shunned me made us leave the memorial as soon as it was finished. We walked out the door and drove out of there, not knowing that there were many people, many Jehovah's Witnesses that I knew, who wanted to speak with us.
Wow.
They were not able to. Yeah. So you see, it started a whole series of events. Pardon me?
Then now
it started a whole series of events. It started a motion to speak out, and that's where it's taken us. And here we are today. I'm talking to you 29 years later.
And you said your mother, as a result, was no longer a witness, right?
Yeah, she kind of she was defensive at first and confused by the whole thing, but eventually she saw the light and disassociated herself. She was never disfellowshipped, but she sort of went off and lived her own happy life with her non-Jehovah's Witness friends. She had one ex-Jehovah's Witness friend, close friend, but other than that, she was with. She went to legions, and danced. She danced her life away for the next 15 years until she died. Yeah.
Wow. So as
she
a
died
result,
a non-witness, and she died. She was. We had her memorial in a community church in the north end of Winnipeg, a poor little church. And I got a singer, a funeral singer, professional, to sing spirituals.
Wow. That's awesome. That's awesome. As a result, did any other
she
members
asked
of your
for that.
family
She
come out?
asked for that, Augustine. A month before she died, she attended my sister-in-law's funeral memorial in that same church, and she said to me,
"Oh, wow.
I want my funeral to be here." So she was not. We did not have a Jehovah's Witness ceremony. We had a ceremony in a non-denominational Christian church with spirituals, a singer and a piano player.
That's awesome.
You know, Amazing Grace, those kind of songs. Swing Low, Sweet Chariot, those kinds of songs.
Yeah, the old hymn.
And my Jehovah's Witness niece from Ponoka, Alberta, came 1,000 miles for the funeral, and she was not very happy about that at all. She told me so. But she attended it.
Wow.
So there you go.
I just want to let our listeners know we're down to the last 13 minutes of the program, so if you want to speak with Jim Kostelniuk, press 1. The number is 347-934-0379, and you can get a chance to talk to the author of Wolves Among Sheep, the true story of murder in the Jehovah's Witness community. We want to encourage you to go ahead and get that book at Amazon.com, and to see the Deadly Devotion Witness to Murder, Episode 6 of Season 2 on ID Channel. If you can find that on the ID Channel webpage, or I'm sure you can probably find it on Amazon or somewhere on the web. It's just amazing now, the technology. And you can see these programs. You might have to pay for it or something, but you can see these programs. And now people are just canceling their cable networks and just watching TV through the internet. So, and I'm going to be joining that community soon. So, but if you want to go ahead and speak with Jim, now is the time before we end the program. Jim, I'm definitely going to get you in touch with John Cedars.
Okay, that's good.
Rick wants to be in touch with you. He would like to have you on Six Screens again.
Okay,
and,
sure.
Me and Rick will both be at the PA convention next week.
Well, I'll be looking forward to hearing the results of that.
Yeah, I'll talk to him about it there, so I definitely want to get as many people for you to speak to that are doing things on the internet.
So I appreciate that. I think it's a wonderful community that's out there, so varied.
Yeah, and the Watchtower Society is doing everything they can. One guy on YouTube said they're playing whack-a-mole, and
which means
you know how it is. You hit one of the moles, out of the machine, and then another one pops up.
Yeah, another one pops up. Yeah.
Right.
So are they trying to shut down YouTube, that kind of thing?
They've been trying to shut down people's YouTube channels, and then all these people do is just pop up another one. So
it's whack-a-mole. That's like
whack-a-mole.
They're not succeeding, are they?
No, they're not doing well. And it really, what's amazing is that they're spending all of this money and to shut down these personal, really small mom and pop YouTube websites.
Small mom and pop operations. I know who they are.
Yeah. That are exposing.
One of them is Mike and Kim, right?
Yeah, Mike and Kim. Yeah, Mike and Kim was one of them.
I watched
them. And they'll be on our program again next month. We've done a cross promotional thing where they would have the interview on their channel from their YouTube channel. And we're down to the last 10 minutes of the program. I just want to thank you for coming on Healing X.
Well, thank you, Augustine, for having me.
And it's a tragic thing. The story needs to be told. people need to be informed,
Mm-hmm.
so that they don't have to suffer what you suffered. And that's the thing about it, is iron sharpens iron. We all have had something in our story that we need to tell to help others. And
yes, and there are so
I'm
many
glad.
people out there with stories, aren't there, Augustine? People who are suffering and have terrible things happen to them, just awful things. My heart goes out to them too.
Yeah.
So many
Absolutely.
different individuals.
So people go to Amazon.com, get the book. I'm going to get the book, and look for James on other websites and YouTube channels. We're going to definitely try to plug him into some other outreach communities so that he can continue to tell his story and we can get the word out. I want to let everyone know next week we're going to have Tammy Dickerson, former Jehovah's Witness, wrote a book, Jehovah's Witnesses in the United Nations. So that'll be definitely interesting, because the Jehovah's Witnesses, the Watchtower Bible Tract Society, denounces political involvement, and yet they had they were involved with the UN as an NGO. That is a non-governmental
organization. As an NGO,
organization.
yeah. That's hard to believe, isn't it? I would never have believed that like 20, 30 years ago, that they would do that.
The thing about it is amazing is, to be an NGO in the UN, you have to agree to promote the ideas of the UN. And
which is partly civil rights and the right to choose your own religion without interference.
Yes.
Isn't that true?
Yeah.
And I'm with the UN on that.
Yeah, and they did that. They actually did that.
But aren't they supposed to be the wild beast?
Yeah, the wild
that attacks
beast.
The harlot?
Yeah, they were riding the wild beast too, right along with some other people. So all the accusations, once again, the hypocrisy, it just never ends. So
are they still an NGO for the UN, Augustine?
I think that they are, but not through the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society now, because they've been very covert. Now they have several organizational names. They have several branches, several corporate names.
Corporate names. They've splintered.
Yeah, so they can pull the Watchtower card, and then they can pop back in under another corporate name. But as far as I'm concerned, they've done some amazing things at the UN. They actually, as an NGO of the UN, attended a celebration for safe blood transfusions.
Oh, is there such a thing?
They did this. It was in Europe. It was an anniversary honoring safe blood transfusions worldwide, and Jehovah's Witnesses were there attending in support of this cause. You know. So, it was the birthday of safe blood transfusions.
Oh, for goodness sakes! Now that you mentioned blood transfusions, Augustine, I would like to mention what I saw on Charlie Rose, which is the PBS, a couple of nights ago. He had a guest, Ian McEwan. Some of your listeners may be familiar that he is an English novelist, has won probably the Booker Prize and is world-renowned. He's an atheist, but his latest novel, called The Children Act, is about a 16-year-old boy, a Jehovah's Witness boy, who's in the hospital, sick and dying, and desperately needs a blood transfusion. The judge in the case, this is a novel, and this is the story, how it begins. The judge in the case is a woman who goes to visit him because she would like to talk to him. You know, the kid is dying, and she wants to talk to him. So because of her love of literature, and she introduces him to literature like poets, Keats and Yeats and those kinds of poets, and gets him interested in literature that the boy has never been aware of, establishes a relationship with this boy, she is able to convince him to take a blood transfusion on his own.
Wow.
And this is a novel written by world-renowned novelist Ian McEwan, The Children Act.
Yeah.
For any of your listeners that are interested, I'm going to buy it myself and read it.
Yeah, that's great.
So there you go. he apparently interviewed the witnesses quite extensively on their no blood policies. He thought he told them he thought that these scriptures that they showed him from Acts and Numbers and so forth were just dietary rules having nothing to do with medicine. But he says, so be it. This is the way they are. And he is very much against religious oppression of any kind from any religion.
Yeah.
So that's probably what motivated him to write this novel. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I'm absolutely against all forms of extremism. All forms
Me too.
Of extremism.
Seems to always go wrong, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So thank you for coming on the air. Next week we're going to have same time, 12 o'clock, we're going to have Tammy Dickerson with Nate Beckman. So people support Nate in that endeavor.
Yeah.
And we have a whole list of programmings. If you want to write to us, you can write to us, snail mail, P.O. Box 56, and that is Marbury, Maryland, 20658. Or if you want to share your story or you're seeking counseling, your identity will be, we will keep you anonymous. You can email me at healingxoutreach@yahoo.com. That's the letter X, not EX as in X, but healingx, the letter X, outreach@yahoo.com. We have a whole great list of programs we're going to have. Tony and Nestor Quilan again on October 4th, former Watchtower headquarters workers who were involved in the 1980 shake-up at the headquarters. And Mike and Kim on October 18th. And we're going to fill in the rest of the dates. November 15th we have a debate. So see you next week on Blog Talk Radio at Healing X Outreach. Check out our archives at www.blogtalkradio.com/HealingXOutreach. And see you next week. You all have a great week. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.